All emotional toil leads to shame. It's considered one of the least desirable states of human suffering, the emotional equivalent of rock bottom, lower than fear and deeper than guilt. Shame taps into the 5 primordial fears, and they shape how we engage with the world and how we treat each other. But here's the real question. Is there any utility and value in shame? Is it necessary to use shame in order to uphold values and principles? Or is the very act of using shame shameful? But I feel before we go any further, it's only fair to do a quick disclaimer, so there's no misrepresentation. I personally couldn't give Frenchman's croissant crumble of a what people do and how people choose to live their lives. So long as they're not causing harm or loss to anyone's persons or things, I'm pretty indifferent. And when people cause harm to themselves, as much of that is saddening, I'm a mortal man with my own sins, only there to bear witness, not to judge, but to observe and discern. You can say my heart's a bit too big for this world. Cool, now that's out the way. There's a rule of thumb, which states that it's okay to attack a behaviour, but never attack a person. When discipline is about correcting a behaviour, it obviously has a purpose. But when it becomes about attacking identity, it stops really being about discipline. That was selfish. You are selfish. One is about correction, and the other is about condemnation. Gender absolutely affects how we experience and process shame. Women often experience shame through social embarrassment, for embarrassment is a form and a synonym of being ashamed, being seen as cringeworthy, out of place and unbecoming. It's still rooted in the primordial fears, but it's somewhat focused on how others perceive them. Men tend to experience shame slightly differently. It seems to be through the lens of dishonour, a spiritual stain, if you will. To be shamed is a form of disgrace. And this taps into very ancient codes of morals and conducts, loyalty, heresy, and lots of things, just like the women in Antiquity would have got you executed. Different lens, but same origin, utilising those 5 primordial fears. So let's zoom out of the philosophical standpoint and try and think of a hypothetical scenario. You've got little Johnny. Little Johnny has been picking on the vulnerable children at school. Do we attack him? No. We attack the behaviour and use shame to steer it. Johnny, only cowards pick on people less able than them. Bullies are remembered, but never respected. And if that doesn't work, maybe take them down to the local boxing club where they'll find a young lad and lass who's very humble, very virtuous. It'll put a beating on them a bit of a different way. I'm kidding. With a hypothetical case study of little Sarah, same issue, but Sarah being cruel, petty, and mocking what the other children are wearing. This calls for a bit of a different tone. Shame through embarrassment of the behaviour. Sarah, weak people mock others to feel powerful. Spiteful people end up alone. And the ones laughing with you? Well, babe, they'll laugh at you next. Of course, it's all hypothetical, but we're zooming out of the philosophical part and looking at it in a practical sense. Because the truth is, those exhibiting those behaviour, particularly children, are probably experiencing that behaviour unto why they are projecting it outwards. But again, shame used on a behaviour equals correction. Shame used on an identity is a bit corrupted. It's not about gender. It's about the entry point to empathy. But here's where it gets weird. Modernity is at war with shame, but also weaponizes it constantly with some double standards. If you comment on promiscuity, you're slut shaming. Shaming a man for no sexual experience? That's fine. Man gives the woman the ick? That's not danger. That's not fear. That's embarrassment on her behalf. Comment on obesity? Fat shaming. Mock a man's job or status? No problem. Call out a man's strength and virtue? Toxic. Vulnerable man? Weak. A man's shame for another man's actions and behaviour? Standard day on the internet. It isn't men versus women. It's men and women versus modernity and the problems that manifest from it. Modernity teaches us that shamelessness is a strength, like it's progress, like it's freedom. But how's our mental health? How's our relationships going? How's the families and children doing? Yeah, not great. People broadcast shamelessness online, but feel shame deep-rooted in private. For example, someone might feel shame in doing a low-end job stuck in a cubicle 9 to 5 low pay. That shame leads to shameless content online. The shame of rejection leads to the shamelessness of compulsive escapism. We're all trying to climb out of shame, emotionally, philosophically, spiritually, but pretending it doesn't exist or it's not somehow useful and has utility, well, it just keeps us stuck. Back in Antiquity, shame was public and shame was creative. A man caught being a petty criminal, head in the stocks, rotten eggs off his dome. A woman with a sharp tongue, or they break out the bridal scorn. Literally a metal muzzle. Imagine that shit in Costa. They've got the mask on, having their coffee. Do you remember what Sally's doing? When researching this, it says that some husbands would allow their wives to pick out their own bridal scorn. Like a guy these days going, yeah love, take me wallet, go down to the bootings and buy yourself a nice muzzle, will ya? It also reminds me of like the other cultures, the Japanese culture. I'm a big fan of Japanese culture, but during the times of the samurai and Bushido code, a man was to disgrace and dishonour his clan and his family, would carry out the ritualistic murder of himself through seppuku. Wait, I've been watching Pornhub. Fucking Jesus, everyone would be executing herself on the town square. It was a lot more public, it was a lot more creative and a lot more consequential. And of course it wasn't always just, but it was certainly arguably intentional. Shame upheld religious and civic virtues. Women were judged, so too were the heretics, sinners and the heathen. Oftentimes though, this judgment was passed by sinful men interpreting divine law. So yes, fuck the patriarchy. But also, isn't modernity just swinging the shame stick in a completely other direction? More of the rubber band theory in another video. So if shame was a public theatre, what is it now? Modern culture is built on shame cycle, on outrage algorithms and manufactured dissonance between women and men and the family unit collectively. Why? Because shame drives attention, and attention drives profits. You're worthless if you are not seen. You should be ashamed if you're not trending. Even this video is begging for your attention. And you should be ashamed if you don't subscribe and like if you haven't already. Shame, when used properly, has always had a way of rising us up. Shame, at best, draws the line between who we are, but also who we could be. Modernity may reject accountability, but we don't have to. Use shame not to destroy it, but to build better behaviour. Use shame as a compass and a guide, not a cage. Use it to correct and not crush. And maybe not so much outwardly in the judgment and the shaming of others, but within our own behaviour, in our own self-analysis and self-reflection. And it's certainly, even if it's not done overtly in modernity, it's done behind closed doors. But what do you think? Is there any utility in shame? Or is it shameful to shame in the first place? Thanks for watching. And if you've got any shame to throw in the comment section, make sure it's creative, or I'll find you and put a bridal scorn on you. Thanks for watching. Best wishes.